Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar today. I'm Francis Seeley from Global Net 21 and Enfield Climate Action Forum. And today we're going to talk about community energy. Now, community energy is something that people are beginning to think about more and more because it involves communities in developing their own energy, and it also helps save on the climate, on the carbon footprint. And so it's becoming something that is becoming more in the forefront of people's minds. And today we've got Sydney Charles with us, who's been involved in community energy in the London Borough of Haringey, and is also involved with Community Energy England. And so we're going to talk to her today. So Sydney, thank you for joining us. And if I could ask you, first of all, I know you're in the Haringey Climate Forum, but could you tell us very briefly about yourself and why you got involved in climate change?
Okay, well, I've been going back to when I retired a few years ago. I was concerned about climate change, but I assumed that the powers that be in the government would be sorting it all out before it got desperate. But as time went on, it looked as though we'd have to do things ourselves. So, I work with the Think Global, Act Local idea, and I got involved with a few local activities. Particularly Highgate Society Sustainable Living and Transition Highgate. And we talked about saving energy and whatnot. Then I got involved with Power Up North London that was putting solar panels on a church in West Lane. And when they finished that, I then started working with Energy, which is based in N10, but all around the place, putting solar panels on. Because community energy is people getting together with a shared concern about the effect energy has on exacerbating climate change. And there's two sort of directions of things that you can do: create more clean energy or save wasting energy and try and reduce dirty energy. So that's why I got involved with Energy. But then the Haringey Climate Forum was relaunched, and that was a collection of local community groups. It's apolitical. I also belong to the Haringey Labour Climate Action, but there are Greens and Lib Dems on it. And Friends of the Earth, Friends of Parks, Friends of Trees, all sorts of people. And the idea of the Haringey Climate Forum, very similar to NCAP actually, is an intermediary between Haringey Council and the different groups. It makes it a little bit easier for them to sort of corral us all together. And we try and have two-way conversation there.
Okay, I mean, let's go through some of that step by step. I mean, you mentioned, I was going to ask you what community energy is, because we talk about it, but some people may not really know what it is. And you've described that very well. I mean, how is community energy important in terms of tackling climate change?
Well, it is grassroots. I mean, it's all very well people at the top in the government coming up with some scheme or other they've made up. But actually, it's the people on the ground. I mean, there are millions of people in the country. If they all got together and did what they could to increase renewable energy, etc., that would make a huge difference. I think it's more and more understood that communities are the strengths of getting stuff done. Is that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. But I mean, tell us, how did you, communities getting stuff done? Community Energy England is about helping people to get things done. I mean, how have you helped in that? What's your role been in that?
Well, if I can just stop you there, actually, it's Community Energy London I'm the secretary of, which is also a member of Community Energy England, and I know those people. They do a lot of good lobbying. But Community Energy London then started up with, I mentioned a couple of solar groups, but there are more across London: Repowering London, Southeast London, SE24, and one in Brent as well, Brent Pure. They decided to all get together, and that we would be more powerful networking together, sharing knowledge, and also being sort of a convenient point of contact for the GLA. and lobbying the government as well a bit. So I got involved with that when it was formed in 2017 and became the secretary. That has grown from strength to strength because the GLA then started giving grants for feasibility, which was the difficult stage. You know, where do you get the money from to decide whether it's worth spending the money? So the GLA started doing that, and a lot of projects have been done. But we really want to step up and try and exceed Sadiq Khan's targets of solar across London, which I won't quote because I should have written them down somewhere. We really want to do all we can so that every borough has got community energy company, organisation, and that we also work with big property owners like the NHS, like TfL, and really get them on board and do what they can.
Okay, now you mentioned earlier, in terms of getting these projects going, that you're working in Haringey and Muswell Hill, and you mentioned Energy, which is really interesting to see what it does. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that and what it does.
Okay, well, to start with, there was Muswell Hill Sustainability Group, and they were doing all sorts of education and opening green homes and doing all sorts of things. Then they had the opportunity, this was a few years ago, to get some money to do a solar project from DEC as was. And they put panels on Marks and Spencer's in Muswell Hill and the Methodist Church. I wasn't a member of then, I was busy with Power Up North London, but then after that, I moved across to N10. The grant from the government meant that we could get an income from Marks and Spencer's, give away the electricity in the Methodist Church, but then that stopped and we had to start raising funds for new projects. But we did have the feed-in tariff to help with that. So we did a share offer for Woodside School, White Hart Lane, and Fortismere School, Muswell Hill. And we did 12-year investments. You get your money back and interest for local investors. So that was all okay. But then the feed-in tariff stopped and it really was not feasible to do anymore. And there's been a bit of a hiatus. But of course, since the electricity prices have shot up so ridiculously, we can now do projects and we've got some more in the wings. Is that the sort of thing that you wanted to know, Francis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, you said you started with a government grant. To some extent, when you want to start a community energy project, you need some startup funding, don't you? You got a grant. I mean, if an organisation was starting now, how would you advise them about having startup money?
Well, I would definitely ask them to ask for mentorship with Community Energy London, which I believe one of your local groups has done, because then we can explain where the money comes from. Now, the GLA has just launched its 6th version of the London Community Energy Fund. It's got £5,000 in there for mentorship and education, which you absolutely should apply for. But it's also got, I think it's up to £50,000 for feasibility, because if you've got a project, then you need surveyors, you need maybe a heritage assessment, you need legal fees maybe, and you haven't got any of that until you start generating. So that finishes in February, has to be applied for. I would suggest you do that. The CEL website has also got quite a few resources on it. There was something else I was going to suggest as well. Oh yeah, that Community Energy London also is working on a map of London, and it's from aeroplanes or something, I don't know, and it's got about 6 databases all stuck together. It will be launched soon, and with that you'll be able to zoom in on Enfield and see all the suitable roofs that might benefit from solar panels. And then you can start thinking about, well, which property owners would let us do it? Because that is actually the key. If you've got willing and happy property owners, you can get it done. But if you've got any kind of complicated foot dragging, don't care, then difficult to get it done.
So you have to get funding, and that's really useful information. And you have to then get a willing site owner. Is that right?
A willing site owner is absolutely key, but also the group doing the work needs certain skills. I mean, if it's got a lawyer, an accountant, a very efficient administrative person, and maybe a visionary, that's the perfect combination. I feel you have those in Enfield.
Well, I hope we do. But you also mentioned, I think, when I spoke to you before or in correspondence, that you have to negotiate with a district network operator as well. What do you have to do there?
That can be complicated. UK Power Network is probably your district network operator, and they talk a good game of how they want lots of renewables, but there are issues around. They can't always cope with extra solar coming onto the grid, so they can be a bit cautious and ridiculously bureaucratic about getting permission if you are going to export anything to the grid. Now, if you're going to do solar, for instance, and you're going to be using it all on the site, like a school or a hospital or whatever, then that you just need to get permission and say, we're not going to export anything, and they'll say yes. So that can be good, but I know a lot of the Community Energy London groups they do export, and they have get through the DNO, and they have to find a company to buy it, but there are companies that will buy the electricity.
Okay, so supposing you've got all those things in place, or you think you have, and you're going to install solar panels. Do people buy the panels, or do you actually install them because you have them?
Well, we do a turnkey purchase after procurement, and we procure for the panels and the installation, and that can make a lot of difference as to the price. I mean, if you've got very complicated scaffolding, the installation is a big proportion. I had actually thought when we tried to do one on a car park that would be easy for installation because it wouldn't be very high up. But actually, it was very expensive because putting in car park covers when we didn't have them before turned out to be too expensive at that time. I'm not sure about now. Maybe it would be okay.
And once you've got the solar panels in place, they generate electricity. So they generate income as well. Is that an important factor?
It's an absolutely vital factor because we have to pay back the people that have stumped up the money. But there are the LCEF grants I mentioned earlier. There's one phase of those that will pay 25% of the capital. So that would be less to pay back. But yeah, we need to pay back investors with interest. Well, we haven't done one since interest rates have shot up so much. We used to give 3 or 4%, but whether people would invest at that rate now, we're not sure. We'll have to discover that, but it's.
But obviously, those are shareholders who come into the company who get a return on their investment. But what about the cells themselves? How do you sell people the electricity?
Well, so far, Ent Energy has only sold it to the building owners. So there's an academy in White Hart Lane. They were keen, and they buy all of the electricity we generate there at, I think it's 9.5p a kilowatt. I mean, how good is that for 20 years? Was the deal we gave them. And similarly, Marks and Spencer's in Muswell Hill, they buy all the electricity we generate. So, that's part of the deal with the building owners. We will sell at such and such price. So, I mean, any building owners who think they're not going to be there long, or their roof is a bit dodgy and not so keen, but depends on finding the right building owners.
But when you've got the right building owners, you've got the project up and running, do you stop there, or do you get messianic and want more? Do you go out and try and get other people engaged and involved in the project?
Well, that particular project has a very long 20-year, usually administrative burden of reading the meters, claiming fits, claiming the money from the owners and all of that. So that project doesn't finish. And, if you're going to start a new group, you need people that are there for the long haul. But it does make you think, oh, well, what can we do now? Is there another big project we can do? Well, we have been frustrated sort of recently that we couldn't make anything else financially viable, but we've got some. But what you haven't mentioned, you probably gave me the opportunity, is that as well as generating electricity, we are also, as community energy groups, we are also interested in helping people reduce their energy. So going back to the Muswell Hill Sustainability Group where it started, we give them a grant to have a full-time, or a 3-day-a-week person to set up lots of things to help people reduce their energy.
Does that mean reducing their waste as well? I mean, I gather that's one of the aims of the project.
You mean waste as in rubbish?
Yeah.
That's not usually involved with the energy groups, no. As part of Haringey Climate Forum, there's a whole different strand on the Edmonton incinerator and waste, but that's not involved with Ent Energy.
Do you get involved in, I mean, can community energy get involved in other projects apart from solar, for example? There are some, I gather, that are involved in retrofitting.
Yes. The money that you get from doing solar, you can use for various things. And a lot of groups, increasingly, we've got some new groups in Community Energy London that are particularly busy on retrofitting. So yes, that is an important thing. And in the Muswell Hill Sustainability Group, we have green homes where you can go around and look at someone's home that has retrofitted.
Okay, so you can showcase and you can also help. I mean, I gather that some of the retrofitting that goes on is not the expensive insulation, but how people who are on low income can make their homes a bit better in terms of, the fuel crisis. And that's the sort of retrofitting you're talking about, minimal, not the really expensive stuff.
Well, I see it actually in two sort of tranches. And on the Haringey Community Forum website, I'm quite clear on that. There are things that anyone can do: foil behind radiators, LEDs, insulating your floorboards, sticking something up your chimney. You can do that whether you own the property or not, and whether you've got much money. Now, we have got a programme on that at the moment of going to lunch clubs and giving out some of those measures, which we crowdfunded for from Community Energy London. But at the same time, we will give advice about retrofit, because there are some schemes from the GLA. If you are on benefits, you can get up to £25,000 for retrofit. So we'll tell people about those schemes. And then, of course, if you do own your own home, there are lots of things that able to pay, as they're called, can do, and we can point people to that information. But personally, I also, it's sort of separate camps: big retrofit and small measures, as being different aspects.
Okay, so Haringey, in a way, I think is well ahead of a lot of other boroughs, certainly ahead of Enfield. And I know that there are people in Enfield now really interested in developing community energy. So if a borough like Enfield, or a group of people in Enfield, were very keen to start up a community energy project, what advice would you give them to start it up?
I would definitely advise to go to Community Energy London, ask for a mentor. And you'll be allocated one, though I understand you've already started talking to Pamela Harling, who's one of the Ent Energy directors as well. So that's the sort of mentorship that you'd benefit from, pointing you in the right direction, how to form a group, how to set a project up, and the sort of people you need to be involved.
Yeah, no, that's great, and Pam is very helpful on that. I mean, would you also seek collaboration with the statutory authorities, the local authority, the health authorities, for example?
Yes, yeah, that's definitely worth doing. Plus, most boroughs have got a zero carbon fund from when developers have been unable to satisfy the carbon requirements for new developments, and they can be giving money from that as well. So you definitely need to work with the council. The other thing is, for the council, if they own the schools, that's, you can ask them, can we do the schools? And plus they have a planning department, and if planning permission is needed, it would be good if they all worked together. And they have legal departments, so getting all of those on board from the council is definitely valuable.
So it's about getting a sort of broad-based network together. But the difficulty is getting the people, the volunteers, isn't it? Because volunteers very often are enthusiastic to begin with, some of them, and then they go very quickly. That's the nature of volunteers. How have you been successful in Haringey to have people who are there for the long term?
We've really struggled, to be honest, and we're getting to the stage because the original people have all been doing other important things as well. We're getting to the stage of feeling we actually need to employ someone to do some of the admin work, probably not to start with, but as time goes on, and there's a lot of administrative bureaucratic stuff to do. So if you can, do your finances so that you can actually pay someone, I think that helps. That would help a lot.
And is that something that could be done on a sort of part-time paid basis, or do you need a full-time person?
No. Part-time would be fine.
Okay, well, that's really interesting to know. And I mean, how big do you think the community energy project or movement is in the country at the moment? I get the feeling there is growing interest in it all over the country. Do you get that feeling as well?
I do. And the other thing that we're realising, Community Energy London, is though we were formed for community energy groups, there are so many other community groups doing other things. There are churches, there are allotments, there are community centres that, they've not necessarily thought about energy before. They're starting to think about energy now. And we're realising that there's a whole big growth area there. There was an article in The Guardian yesterday, actually, about the growth of community energy groups. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I definitely feel it's growing.
Yeah, and there was a good article about what's happening in one street in Waltham Forest as well,
Yes,
which I think
was they are members of Community Energy London, that group.
They are. Well, that's interesting. So the movement is growing, and getting the volunteers is clearly, as you said, the big issue that you have to sort of confront and work on. So we've talked about that, and I think you've given us a lot of guidance and advice about how to start and knowledge and information about what you're doing. One thing you wanted me to ask you, because you think it's really important and it's happening now, is that there is been a crowdfunder from, is it Community Energy London or England, I'm not sure, to allocate money to help those people suffering from fuel poverty and who are going to face cold in the winter. Do you want to tell us about that and how people can get involved in that?
So Community Energy London is a crowdfunder, and 4 of its member groups have applied. I actually work with one in the Highgate Society. So our idea is to do 4 pop-up events in the warm places. I'm sure you have warm places in Enfield, and sometimes with lunch. So where there's a lunch, we'll go along with LEDs, foil behind radiators, etc., and promotional material with lots of information about what you can do on those 2 camps we just discussed earlier, mainly the small measures, but we'll mention some opportunities for retrofit. So we can only do that with the money we've got for 2 in Camden and 2 in Haringey. But there has been a bit of an explosion of interest in that as a model. And we've applied for some money from Camden Council for the Camden side of Highgate. And I also talked to a councillor in Haringey who was quite keen on it. So it looks as though maybe that could take off as a model and get bigger, because the need is so great. And the councils are giving out a lot of pamphlets and things and websites and whatnot, but some people don't read those things, and it's better to have someone talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really interesting idea, and I think lots of people will be interested in that, including Enfield. I mean, to have those pop-up information points at warm places where people go is incredibly creative ideas. So, that's great that you're doing that. Okay, so we sort of come to the end of what has been a very informative webinar. So can I ask you the last question? That is, if anybody wanted to know more about what you do, either in Community Energy London or what you're doing in Haringey, where would they go and how would they make contact with you?
I think I'd prefer that you went through Community Energy London, which would be info@communityenergy.london, because we do have a staff member who can field all those things and put them to the right place. That's probably the best. But also to look on the communityenergy.london website to look at the resources we've got there.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll make sure people know about that, and I'll put that up on our sites. Anyhow, I mean, Sydney, thank you for doing this interview today, because you've given up a lot of advice, a lot of knowledge as well about how you do things, how you start, and how you sustain and maintain whatever you do, and all the pitfalls and problems. And those are important to know as well, because if you go in it blind, then that becomes difficult. So I think you've given us a great deal of knowledge, and I think local groups like the one in our own borough and other groups as well will find that very, very interesting and valuable for them when they want to start up. So thank you for doing the interview today. It's been really important to do, and we'll end this interview now.
It's been a pleasure, and just to say that community energy is not for the faint-hearted, but it is doable.